Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I want to give you guys a Path of Exile 2 video where I go over some of the mechanics that have to do with charms. Now, charms are kind of the cross between like a new item and the effects that we typically tried to resolve in Path of Exile 1 with the utility flasks. And overall, they're pretty cool. They kind of add a little bit of something on your character that allows you to really mostly overcome your biggest weakness. And in some cases, they are very effective at doing that. In some cases, they don't work very well. In a lot of cases, the charms actually don't do what a lot of people don't think they actually do, and hopefully I can provide some insight to that and show you guys some of the game mechanics that have to do with charms. Now, normally your character only has a single charm slot, so every character is going to have a single charm slot. You want to make sure you have something that actually helps your character. There's a good chance right now you have a charm that's basically useless for you. So, you can get more charm slots up to a maximum of 3. You can get several charm modifiers on belts. Currently, I've found the charm modifiers to be from underwhelming to completely useless. They're generally considered brick affixes on belts, but on the glass half full side of things, these affixes are effectively multiplied by the number of charm slots that you have. So if you have 3 charm slots, the charm modifiers are a lot better, presumably. So maybe you would actually want to use them. Don't completely write them off. You can get +2 charms on a belt. You can also get +1 charm on the passive tree, which has, I believe, a fairly low cost anoint. I think there has to be something better that you can anoint on your amulet than another charm, but if you have like a godly charm belt with only +1 charm, I can see how the +1 charm from the passive tree might actually be very useful. Alright, so to the charms themselves. So a lot of people, I've actually noticed, use this charm. They use the Amethyst charm. So the Amethyst charm gives you 18% chaos resistance, and a lot of these charms actually consume a ton of charges, so 60 to 80. Now you can get modifiers that improve their charges by over 40 points, so if you get a lucky charm that consumes 60, you can actually have 2 uses. Generally, I really like those modifiers where they have extra charges, or I like the modifiers where they passively gain charges, so they can perhaps get a second charge if I do like a longer boss fight. Other than that, I don't feel the affixes are really too impactful. Most people use Amethyst charms because chaos damage is a little bit of a problem, and because chaos damage does double damage to energy shield, and a lot of people are energy shield because it's good. So people need to cap their chaos resist. It's very difficult to cap your chaos resist, so a lot of people are using Amethyst charms. The thing about Amethyst charms is they're a lot worse than you think. Some damage types have a huge amount of damage over time effects and don't actually hit when it comes to triggers. And the charms actually get used when you take chaos damage from a hit. Okay? So like one of the strongest forms of damage that I've seen for chaos are the archers that put a bunch of plants. The plants do like a tremendous amount of damage over time, but they don't actually hit you. So if you're counting on this 18% to take you from like 50 to like 70 and almost half the chaos damage you're going to take, well, if you start taking chaos damage over time and you don't get hit, it's not going to do anything. So that is really important. I think that the Amethyst charm for this reason is not very good. I think the resist charms in general are not very good, especially the fire one, for the same reason as the chaos. A huge amount of fire damage is fire damage over time. Like you can face off against a rare that has all damage ignites or something like that. They can hit you for not fire damage and then do an ignite that does fire damage over time. Right? The burning ground is not going to trigger the charm. It's just like absolutely horrible. The resist charms are pretty worthless through and through. You basically use them until you get your very first charm that does anything else in the campaign. The Silver Charm is a pretty interesting one. There's not a lot of slows that I would consider particularly potent. There might be some value to this if you're playing and doing a lot of Sanctum. The Trial of Sekemas, I believe it's called. The 4th floor boss does quite a few slows, and it has 2 charges baseline, which is pretty cool, I guess. I've never actually used this myself, though. There are also the ailment-based ones, which I think are actually pretty strong, and I will use this moment to give you guys a little bit of a briefing on how these work. So the Thawing Charm is very strong. You can get frozen when you get chilled too much, or I think when you get hit by a hit that has like freeze contribution, like a significant amount, you'll just get frozen right away. Freeze is really bad. You can't do anything when you're frozen, which is why it consumes 80 charges, I guess. You won't be able to get 2 charges out of this one. A lot of characters that are energy shield based are going to want to use this one because the ailment effects are based on how much life you have. There are some affixes in the game. There's even one of the events where you can choose Elemental Ailment Threshold. That will basically calculate the freeze chance and the chill freeze rate based on how much life you would have plus that amount. So those can be pretty good if you have a lot of life. It can give you like pretty much immunity to most of these ailments, so you wouldn't actually need these charms. But characters that are energy shield based, they have pretty decent stun resistance because there's many passives on the tree where you can get your energy shield applies the stun threshold. However, when it comes to ailments from elements, energy shield characters are actually pretty bad. There is a node on the tree, but it's far to the right near the monk area. It's actually not an easy access, so very few people get it. You can get 100% of your energy shield applies to the calculation for free. So that's really good. If you have that, I would never consider running this charm. But for energy shield characters with really low health pools and without that passive node, the freeze charm is going to be one of the best ones that you can select. For Ignite, a lot of the time, Ignite is, again, not what you think. There's a lot of things that count as Ignites, but aren't Ignites. In POE2, there's even some ambiguous ratio of like what is and what isn't. Especially playing Infernalist, I've learned that a lot of things count as Ignites, but are not really scalable with Ignite and don't have Ignite triggers. The Burning Ground type stuff is not an Ignite. So a lot of the time this is not going to work. Why would you want an Ignite charm anyway? The reason you would want an Ignite charm is because an Ignite lasts, I believe, 3 seconds baseline. It's basically going to prolong your energy shield recharge. So if you don't take damage for a while on your energy shield recharges. For damage over time effects, poison goes through energy shield, and bleeding can only be applied to life damage. So actually, Ignite is the only thing that is kind of like a damage over time affliction on your character that would further delay for a while your energy shield recharge. So even though for the purposes of reducing incoming damage, the Ignite charm is pretty bad, for characters that rely on energy shield recharge, if your ailment threshold is low, which again, a lot of the time it is low on an energy shield character, using a dousing charm to kind of like make it so you don't get locked out of recharge for a long time, it actually can be a pretty good idea. I would not use this over a freeze. I would not use this probably over another one. But hey, you might have 3 charms. If you have 3 charm slots, this is a pretty decent consideration. For shock, I've noticed that I don't get shocked a whole lot. I think the shock calculations are actually fairly unfavorable, I would say. Shock is 20% damage taken. 20% damage taken is not that bad. Sure, you might get one-shotted and all that, but if you're getting frozen, you can die. If you're getting stunned, you can die. If you're getting ignited, it might lock you out from thousands of energy shield recovering. If you get hit with poison, you can die. If you get hit with bleeding, you probably will die. With shock, it's just 20% more damage, so it's not that bad. It also triggers when you become shocked. It's not when like you're hit with a shocking hit or anything. So this charm will actually just get blasted on maps with shocking ground. So it's actually pretty useless once again. For the other ailments, the poison one is very significant. I actually use the poison one on most of my characters right now. So poison damage is chaos damage, but it actually bypasses energy shield. There's not a lot of poison sources in the game, but it can be difficult to deal with poison if you are hit with it. Because if you have like 10,000 energy shield and like 1,000 life, well, if they hit you with a poison, you're going to be chugging that health pot. And a lot of the time, that is going to be my biggest weakness. If you go Chaos Inoculation, you don't need to get immunity from poison because poison is chaos damage. Poison can be applied from physical damage and deal chaos damage, so it's a little bit unintuitive there. And some monsters can have chance to poison, and some maps can give poison to all the monsters based on all their damage, which is actually really deadly. However, if you're careful, a charm like this can be good enough. Another solution for doing especially those maps where everything poisons, if you have a huge energy shield pool and a tiny health pool, is to use Mind over Matter. Mind over Matter is going to make it so you have less mana regeneration. That's true. But Mind over Matter, your mana doesn't actually get nuked from energy shield damage. It's only life damage. So if you use Mind over Matter, when you get poisoned, your life doesn't go down, only your mana goes down until you have 0. So there are some other ways to deal with this, but characters that have really low HP pools and really high energy shield pools, there's a good chance that the poison is the biggest threat to your character. I also want to point out that this charm actually does prevent you from taking damage from poison. You will not take poison damage with this. You have to be hit with poison, but before it first does damage, you become immune to it, which is actually really nice. So it actually works as you might expect it to. Whereas if you're wondering, something like Freeze, you do actually get frozen for, the tiniest frame, and then you continue on. Freeze, I believe, does not interrupt your character from animations, but Stunned does. We'll get to that in a second. Just to cover the ailments, Bleeding is similar to Poison, but Bleeding has to do life damage. So it does quite a lot of damage, and it does extra damage if you're moving, I believe, still. Honestly, pretty much all my characters have been energy shields, so bleeding has been a non-factor for me. But a number of people are still playing life-based characters, and again, kind of like the poison one, it can be the biggest weakness to your character. Path of Exile 2 does not have physical reduction, really. You can get it as a roll on your shield and Cloak of Flame. That's it. The other sources of physical reduction are only hit-based and will not apply to the damage that you're taking from bleeding. So this can be one of the biggest weaknesses for your character, especially if you are playing like an evasion mobility based one. Well, you might take a big blade with your tiny health pool in the rare time that you actually get hit. The stunned one is probably the most interesting one. A lot of players are going to use the stun one, not so much because stunning is bad. That's true, stunning is bad, but stun actually works a little bit differently. The way that stun works in Path of Exile 2, at least the way that I understand it, is that you have kind of like an invisible stun threshold meter. So it's not like POE1 where if you get hit for a super tiny hit, you'll just never get stunned. I've been hit for like 100 damage on my Titan and I've been stunned. So I can soft confirm that something other than that is going on. I've seen it on the POE2 wiki that it uses kind of like a threshold, a build-up for stun, kind of like it does on monsters. If you keep doing a bunch of damage to a boss, you'll see the stun meter keeps going up, and eventually they just get stunned. Well, it's believed that players effectively have an invisible stun meter, so that means that even though you have tons of health, even though you have tons of damage reduction, even though you have tons of threshold for a stun, you're still going to get stunned. you're going to get stunned just eventually. Yeah, you might have to get hit like 20 times, but you get hit 20 times and you're still going to get stunned. So characters where you basically die if you are stunned are going to want to use this. So a lot of characters engaging in melee combat would want this. Another thing that makes this a bit worse is actually you still get stunned, which means your cast is still interrupted. Honestly, I kind of wish they would not make stun work this way. I think not being able to get stun off the table completely in any way, shape, or form is kind of maddening. And the fact that the only soft immunity to it is the stone charm, which doesn't even work to prevent the interruption that you receive from being stunned. But again, through charms, if your biggest weakness is getting stunned, that's the one you're going to need to use. The last one is the golden charm, so 20 rarity. This is pretty interesting. I've actually seen a few posts about rarity, and they've done some tests and stuff. It looks like a lot of the rarity comments were a bit overblown. It turns out that after you have like 60, 80, or like 100 rarity, it doesn't actually do very much at all. Most of the crazy results from Magic Find have to do with the fact that Breach just spawns crazy amount of monsters, and you can get hundreds of rarities on those maps through the tablet system. Now, that doesn't mean that rarity is bad. Rarity is actually still pretty good. The rarity charm uses all 80 of 80 charges, so it's certainly pretty expensive. It will be used on killing a rare and a unique enemy. Bosses in your maps will already have a massive hidden rarity multiplier, so on bosses it's actually not going to do very much, especially because it's only 20%. But on rare monsters, if you have like actually almost no rarity at all on your character, it will be pretty good, because rarity up until like, 60, 70, 80, 100, let's say, is actually going to give you noticeable differences in drops and currency drops as you play the game. And while it's not going to do much of anything against the unique enemies, you really don't kill that many bosses in the current mapping system. You kill way more rares than you do bosses, and the rares account for more than half of the loot that you get for the entire map. So this charm is actually pretty good. However, it is going to be one of those charms that is largely used by characters with multiples, because right now in the current state of the game, all characters kind of have like something that's wrong with them, and that needs to be fixed as a priority to getting a little bit of Magic Find. Overall, I kind of like the charm system, but I feel like it deserves a few more revisions, especially with the resistance charms. They could really help to have just like reduction from those elements. The whole activation that is only hit-based, I think, is awful, and will be a deceptive defensive layer to a lot of people not realizing how some of those mechanics work. But if you've made it to this part in the video, thank you very much for watching it, and hopefully now you'll see that some of those hit-based mechanics are not worth using, and you'll be able to overcome the weaknesses of your characters with the new information. See you next time.